Hi, we're back with another cognitive bias.
All right. See, I've been missing these.
This one is from the grouping. We've got the different conundrums or problems that we have, and this is from the one of not enough time. And the strategy that it uses is number 13, which is...
Lucky number 13.
All other things being equal, we tend to stay safe. We tend to choose a safe choice, okay?
Yeah, but we've kind of done this a little bit with other thoughts, right?
Yeah, maybe another one.
They're kind of interwoven.
They are. And a lot of, and there's several connected to this too. We're going to talk about one.
Good. Okay.
So I've got quite a page of notes here. So the authority bias is a cognitive bias that happens when we give undue or weight or credence, belief to the opinion or the actions of somebody in authority that's in a position of authority.
Oh, we've
like
all done
doctors, politicians, celebrities, teachers. Of course, we're trained to do that. We are literally trained to do. I mean, it's a survival mechanism, probably from evolution. You know, from a tribal standpoint. You know, there's always tribal elders, and the elders or the shaman or somebody in charge has access to more resources, right? So staying on their good side meant you got more food or more something. Okay, so I mean, it's totally natural. And we are also raised to defer to authority. I mean, otherwise, basically the police couldn't do their job. You know, if we weren't somehow taught to respect that.
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
We've got to have some order to have a society.
Yeah, some of us don't like authority. That's ain't cool.
So where this becomes a cognitive bias, in other words, or a heuristic, in other words, something that we don't really think about, we just do it automatically.
Heuristic.
And it changes it doesn't work in our favor, okay, is when we do it too much or we overdo it. Like we do something that we defer to authority without any thought and might do something that's not in our best interest or that they might ask us to do something that's not appropriate. Now that's not common, but it happens. So it's a shortcut. We've talked about cognitive biases as a shortcut.
Right.
Okay, so it's reasonable. It's reasonable to put our trust in credible experts, right?
Oh, okay.
We do there are people that are very knowledgeable. Like we go to a doctor because he's been to 12 years of medical school or something, and he knows stuff that we don't know. But when we assume that somebody in authority or somebody that knows a lot in a particular area knows a lot about everything, or we assume that they know something about an area that's outside their training, that's when the trouble starts.
That's when the fight begins.
Okay, so we basically assume they have more knowledge or skills than they actually do. And I mentioned doctors. Doctors, we've known a lot of them, and they're people. They're people just like us, and they have their own biases and their own prejudices and their own weaknesses and their own gaps.
That's why it's called a practice.
And back in the 70s, when the cholesterol controversy was raging, and we were in the egg business, and I started studying it, one of the things that came out was that most doctors at that time didn't take a single nutrition course during their training. So they knew about the same amount about nutrition as their receptionist, unless she had been on a diet and then she knew more. That was what was told to me. So
that's great. Oh, I love that.
I'm just picking on doctors because they are very common authorities, and we tend, my parents, I observed my parents very much. They would just, if a doctor told them to do something, they did it, no question. Today, we tend to get second and third opinions about things, and so we balance that bias a little bit.
And I demanded that they did too.
Okay, so one of the things, we'll come back to this, but we need to evaluate when somebody is in authority, we need to evaluate whether or not they have expertise in the specific area that they're asserting or that we're assuming that they know, rather than just assuming. Okay,
and I don't like that either. I like being questioned.
That's true. That is actually there's another. That was another one that came up in my research.
For 18 years.
I think it was expertise blindness. Maybe was the name of it. And it was that an authority is used to being deferred to, and so then they tend to assume that they know more than they do.
Right.
There's another cognitive bias there as well. So they don't want to be questioned because they're very much used to not being questioned. Okay. This was first identified in a Milgram obedience experiment, which was also called the Milgram Shock Experiment. I have heard of this before. You may have too. So what happened, this was the first and the most infamous study on this authority bias. It was conducted in 1961 by a guy named Stanley Milgram. He was a professor of psychology at Yale University. And part of his motivation, well, let me say first. So what he was doing was he wanted to see how obedient people would be when they were instructed to harm another person by an authority. And this was inspired by the observations or the common, at the time, common explanation of the not what had happened in Nazi Germany, where people did horrible things and then claimed they were just following orders. Okay, so he kind of wanted to test that. So what they did is they brought a bunch of people, they got study participants, and they recruited them for a learning experiment. And they told them, here's a group of people, some of you are going to be learners and some of you are going to be teachers, just randomly assigned.
Right.
And the teachers are going to ask questions of the learners, and the learners are going to attempt to respond to those questions. Okay. So when a learner got the question wrong, the teacher was then going to press a button and give them an electric shock. They were wired up to electrodes. And for each time they got a wrong answer, the shock got bigger. They had to keep turning it up. It was even more than that. It wasn't automatic. The teacher had to keep turning the dial up.
Oh,
that was the instruction.
Yeah.
Okay. Now what they didn't know was that all of the people, the ordinary people that were recruited for this experiment, they were all the teachers. And all the learners were on the inside. They were part of the experiment. They knew they were part of creating the experiment. Okay? Because nobody was actually getting shocked.
Oh, okay. But
And
they had to react like they were.
Exactly. So they pretended, and they were crying and they were screaming and just, react as the shocks got higher, because the shocks went up to about 450 volts. It was no small amount that they were talking about. Okay, so what happened? Well, so nobody was actually getting shocked. They were faking their pain. 65% of the people that had been recruited for this continued to increase and shock them, because they were pushed to do this a little bit. Okay, the people conducting the experiment said, you have to do this. It's really important that you do this or something. So there were 4 levels of prodding them, they called, to keep going. Some of them didn't want to. I mean, some of them, they were sweating and they were having, I think 2 of them actually had seizures from the stress.
Ooh.
Okay, this was the 60s. I'm not going to excuse it. It's the past. But it put them under a great deal of stress. But still, 65% took it all the way. And
that's actually kind of shocking.
Yeah. So other experiments, other less not contrived experiments have been done since. One that I saw, and I'm going to put in the notes, I'm going to put, I'll put the sources so you can read more about this.
Right.
But there was a study of avalanche, people that were hurt in an avalanche or an accidents that happened. And a lot of those people got into the situation, they got into this danger and the avalanche because they were following, it was a group and they were following a leader. Well, they chose the leader not because they were a member of the ski patrol necessarily. It didn't get real detailed, but because they were older or because they seemed confident. These are other things that we tend to use, right? If I'm kind of an introverted person and I'm not real self-confident and I'm around somebody that's very confident in themselves, yeah, I will tend to follow them because they seem stronger or somehow more authoritative. And
might know what the hell they're doing.
Assume that they know what they're doing when they don't, or might not. Okay, so yeah, these people had no training. They were just either older or confident. Another study looked at
lead you into an avalanche.
Medical students.
There we go.
Medical students' willingness to over-prescribe antibiotics. So, there was this was known to them that this happened, but if their mentors or their role models were in the habit of over-prescribing the antibiotics, then
so they followed.
They were following suit. They were following the role model, even though they knew that it was likely not to be effective. The medical students knew that the antibiotics probably wouldn't work. So they were educated. They weren't ignorant, but they still followed the behavior. Okay?
Okay.
So now we're going to turn to marketing. Mm-hmm. Okay? How about things like 4 out of 5 doctors recommend something? And now again, it's a common authority figure, but it was used back in the 40s and 50s to sell cigarettes.
We all know how that works.
And I know we've all seen commercials where they,
Oh, yeah.
some expert. Or another thing is that in a commercial they will position somebody in a white coat, or with a stethoscope around their neck, or with a white coat and a clipboard.
And they were talking heavy.
And their uniforms also. It doesn't have to be. It could also be a military uniform or a police uniform. There are other uniforms that convey that sense of authority, and so they
use this.
They do. They use that to trigger this, intentionally to trigger this bias in us because they know that it influences us. Celebrity. How about Hollywood celebrities?
Yeah.
Now, I want to credit the celebrities that use that authority, that celebrity to bring awareness to things that need
to do good.
To do good, basically, to bring awareness to things. But when they then begin to exceed that and speak about things that they really aren't trained on and act like experts in something they're not expert in, then this is another example of that, using that, and maybe not intentionally, but so how do we avoid the bias?
Yeah, how do we do that?
The first thing is we have to ask ourselves, what do we assume about authority? Right? We got to look in the mirror a little bit. And do we assume that they're always fair and objective? That was actually something that was studied, and there was a tendency to assume that an authority, because they were an authority, that they were automatically objective. I mean, they had some training in that or something. No. Is
there such a thing as objective training?
Objectivity training?
Yeah.
Well, in the sciences, so scientists say, that's another very popular marketing term. Scientists say, and we believe it just because somebody wrote that scientists say, because they're scientists. Okay. So the next thing is ask if I'm assuming, I should ask myself if I'm assuming that they know something that's outside their really specific field. Okay, so like a neuroscientist, for example,
talking about ecology,
or something even farther afield, geology.
Oh, that's true.
Okay. I mean, let's go. It's a different science. It's still a science, but it's nowhere near their specialty.
Right.
And they're unlikely to have any training in it.
True.
Okay.
Unless it's a hobby.
In a more social setting.
Oh yeah, like socials.
We need to be aware of the tendency to go along with a group, like especially if they're our group, a group of friends or a group of people we know.
All your friends are jumping off the building. Do you go too?
Whose parent said that to them?
Oh right? Yeah.
If everybody else was doing it, yes. That's a very related bias called the bandwagon effect, and it's very much like peer pressure. Peer pressure, though, as I understand it, peer pressure is more about peers are urging you to do something and to go along, whereas the bandwagon effect is more self-directed. You're going along because they're doing it. They don't have to ask you to do it. Okay, but there's both this societal the authority thing, and there's also the part of just being part of a group.
Okay, cool.
So, and the last thing is if you're the authority, okay, if you're in the position of being authority, how do you avoid the bias both in yourself and others? And that is to make sure that you look at both sides of things. Look at points of view that are opposite from your point of view. What if I was wrong? And we have talked about this one before. If I was wrong, what would I believe, or what would the situation be? And then make sure that present that to the people that are listening to you, and present both sides. So they get a balance, and then make sure you suggest to them that they do their own thinking. Okay. and just encourage that. So
cool.
So that's the authority bias, and I think we're all familiar with it. But wow, I found layers to that I had not even thought about or didn't know.
Especially in the marketing, it's so insidious in our culture.
Yeah.
The TV.
Yes, and that is one of the reasons we're doing this series, is because marketing and social media is such a strong influence in our lives that we have to protect ourselves, because nobody else is going to do it.
Nobody else cares. As long as we just give them money. That's all they want, is money.
Seems that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us, and we will see you in another video.
Bye.
Bye.